Okay, so we're up to, what are we up to? Week 4. Week 4. So we're going to talk about regret tonight. We have finally reached the end. I say finally because that's a figure of speech, not because I've been looking forward to it. The next series, which begins next week, it's on hate and forgiveness. That's the next series, but the series after that, I'm excited for. The reason why I'm excited is because last week I made a quick throwaway, not comment. It was, I don't know what a comment made of many sentences is called, but a quick throwaway paragraph. I know my English teacher wouldn't like such a phrase, but it was a quick throwaway paragraph right at the end of the series, after at the end of last week's class, after the meditation. I just brought it back together in context of the 10 Sfirot. And I thought you should know that not the next series, but the series after that is on how the world came into existence and understanding the 10 Sfirot in its role in creation, in existence, and then what that means for us as human beings, how the 10 Sfirot play into forming our personality, and how understanding this can help us, A, change our personality, B, get a better understanding of who we are. So some very, very cool stuff coming up. But let's not talk about the cool stuff coming up. Let's talk about the cool stuff that we've got planned for tonight. Okay, so we're doing regret. That's what we're covering this week. Last week we covered anger and fear together because anger and fear, although they are not the same, both had enough negativity in the explanation that we could lump the two together for the sake of last week's discussion. And in short, what we covered last week, can't do it in short, but just to touch on what we did last week, is that anger is a very generic word, and once you start digging, anger becomes something that's quite hard to define. But what we could explain anger or understand anger to be is a secondary response to an initial emotional response. So we get angry because of something that lies between the point of impact and how we're feeling right now. So we said there's a point of impact where someone does something to us, or something happens to us, or we do something to ourselves. That's the point of impact. Then there is our response, deeply hurt, deeply violated, boundaries crossed. It could be any number of these things. Deep state of regret, deep state of sadness, deep state of something, not a proper response internally, as in not a conscious response. It manifests into anger because of a fight or flight instinct that's being brought in without us even being aware at the time, and all sorts of other things. We said anger is not anger. Anger is a response to another deep feeling that has been triggered as a result of something else. And so what we discussed last week was the importance of Merchal 11, the way it interplays in that awareness of the feeling before it turns into anger. And we discussed anger within itself, and our conclusion was that anger, not what everyone calls anger, but anger in the true form, has never got a place and should never be allowed. Of course, that doesn't mean we can't be hurt. Of course, that doesn't mean we shouldn't recognize where someone has hurt us or insulted us, or our values have been compromised, or whatever it is. Of course, there's a response there, but the response is not anger. The response may be talking firmly to that person. The response may be punching them in the head. The response may be never talking to them again. All of these could be legitimate responses, as long as they're not coming from a place of anger, but rather from the point of response to that initial emotion. And I'm not going to go into that again this week because we did that last week. Then we discussed fear. And fear is, again, we spoke about the unpleasant feeling that is fear. We spoke about anger as being a point of disconnect, Anger is something in which we are disconnected from everything or everyone in a situation. And fear is a reference to where there is a lack of connection or a lack of belonging to something greater. So in fear, we're alone. In anger, we're also alone. But in anger, we're alone because we have removed ourselves. In fear, we are alone because we have allowed ourselves in that moment to be alone. And we went into that again, what the responses to those are. Today, I want to talk about regret. Now, regret is complicated because I can't say regret is bad, because regret is very, very good. The problem is that regret is very bad. And so it's very hard in how we word this. So I saw a cute line. I think I wrote this down. What was it? No. Transformative regret. I like that because it allows us to use the R word, but it prefaces it with what sort of regret it is. Regret on its own is a very, very big problem. And we've discussed the problem before, and I'm going to bring it up again. The Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, who gets a lot of airtime around here, the Baal Shem Tov being one of the greatest mystics in the last 300-400 years. In general, one of the greatest mystics, but he lived 300 years ago. And the Baal Shem Tov makes an interesting comment when a person prays. He was talking to his students. The Baal Shem Tov never wrote anything in his own lifetime. So anything that is attributed to the Baal Shem Tov is not what he wrote. It's what one of his students recorded at a time of his speaking. If he wrote, it was minimal amount. Most of what we have from the Baal Shem Tov is what his students wrote down. Similarly, interesting, the Arizal. The Arizal, the Kabbalist, didn't write things down. His students wrote things down. He had primary students, and they wrote things down, both in his lifetime and after he died. In fact, one of his students, Reb Chaim Vital, wrote things down and then regretted it, so he buried himself. When he was buried, he asked that his ksovim, that his writings, be buried with him. And his ksovim were put into the grave. His son, Reb Shmuel Vital, instructed that they be dug up after his father was buried. And there's a whole story in that. But often mystics didn't write. I mean, interestingly, both the Baal Shem Tov and the Arizal died very early, very young. They lived very short lives. That's right. So not that they didn't have time to write down, but there was so much achieved in their lifetime, it was up to their students to really record. But the Baal Shem Tov says, in regards to tefillah, so we know prayer is very, very structured in Judaism. There isn't a lot of room anymore for the organic, self-explored and self-designed prayer. That's something that hasn't existed in Judaism for over 2,000 years. Once upon a time, everyone made up their own prayer. That stopped when people were no longer able to write their own prayer. Prayer is not a poem. Prayer is not, I feel like saying this or I don't feel like saying that. Prayer is a recognition and an understanding of the deep mystical meaning within each letter and each word, stringing them together to become an energy formation, stringing words together so that the words become specifically designed sentence structures, which can then take a feeling or take a thought and turn it into a form of connection with the infinite. That's what prayer is. We don't have that power anymore. We don't have that power. It's if you think you can achieve what I just said, write a prayer book. But already a couple thousand years ago, people lost this power, this deep-seated understanding of the mystical power of letters, words. And the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, in fact, not only did they lose that, many Jews, we're talking about in a time where the global Jewish community lived in a very centralized part of the world. They lived in Israel. And extended to Babylon. It wasn't that broad 2,300 years ago. Over that period, it became more extended. But the Jews were quite centralized still at that point in the world. at that point of history, and many Jews couldn't read or speak Hebrew. Just couldn't. So it wasn't just that they lost the mystical understanding of prayer, they'd lost the ability to express themselves in a very specific spiritual way. They'd lost the ability to even read Hebrew, which is the language of prayer. Not that one can't pray in English, but the language of prayer is Hebrew, because Hebrew is a very specific language in which each word and each letter is a revelation of light. It is an energy. It is a code. And each word, so I'll give you examples. On Yom Kippur, we add one word to the Kaddish. One word to the Kaddish. In some Ashkenazi communities, they add this word for the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But in this shul, in spiritual, we only do it on Yom Kippur. And it's only during the Ne'ilah prayer. We say, La'ela u'la'ela mikol b'chasa v'shirasa. Normally it's La'ela min kol birchasa. On Yom Kippur, it's la'ela or la'ela mikol. We drop the word min and we roll the mem into the word kol and it becomes one word. Whoa! What would be so tragic if we said min kol instead of mikol? And the answer is you'd have too many words. You'd have too many words. The number of words specifically to be in place is one number. If you add a word, you've changed the whole number. You change the number, you've changed the whole message. Not the message on an intelligent level, the message on a spiritual level. So prayer is very specific. So the Baal Shem Tov says, if you are praying and you all of a sudden wake up and you're 10 pages ahead of where you were, not an uncommon thing for those that pray, to just find yourself all of a sudden at the end of the prayer service. No one knows how you got there. You don't know how you got there. I don't know, you were dazing out and all of a sudden you were there. And the Baal Shem Tov says, do not go back and repeat the prayer. But I didn't have any intention or meditation. The Baal Shem Tov says, don't. If you've said it, don't repeat it. But what about the lack of intention? And the Baal Shem Tov says, if you repeat it, you are denying that there is purpose in existence. If you repeat it, you are saying then what has just happened is for naught. It didn't have meaning to me. It had no meaning. The Baal Shem Tov says, now that it has happened, you have to allow it to have happened. What you can do is you can learn from it. Next time, don't fall asleep while praying. But don't go back and repeat unless it's one of the specific sentences that Jewish law says. If you didn't say it with intention, you have to repeat, which are only a few sentences in the whole prayer. So what do we see from the Baal Shem Tov? And this is just one example. But I'm bringing it because it seems so sensitive. We see that when something happens, it is what was meant to happen. Until something has happened, it's not meant to happen. When something has happened, that is what was meant to happen. If it wasn't, it wouldn't have happened. So when we talk about regret, we often use words like, if only I did this, or if only that didn't happen, or if only I could wind the clock back. Who here is not guilty of ever using such language? We all use it. We all use such language. We all have the wish to go back. How many things have happened in this past week alone that you don't want to take back what happened or something, or I shouldn't have said that. When someone says, I shouldn't have said that, what I hope they mean is next time when I'm in such a situation, I'm not going to say that. But you can't say I shouldn't have said that. Because if it was a problem, if it was something that shouldn't have happened, it wouldn't have happened. So even hurtful things, once they have happened, even violent things, once they have happened, even tragedies, once they have happened, now that they have happened, one has to accept that that was what was meant to happen at that time. That doesn't make it easier, not at all. That's not because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is a state of acceptance. Acceptance. And what's the acceptance? The acceptance is that it happened on the infinite conscious's watch. There is an infinite conscious. We refer to this in English as God. What is God? So God is, as Maimonides says, as I like to point out, the knower, the known, and the knowledge. The knower, the known, and the knowledge. The story, the writer, and the book. It is me. So have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror? What are you looking at? You're looking at your reflection. You're not looking at you. You're looking at your reflection. But imagine you could look at yourself in the mirror and also be the character in the mirror. So imagine you could look at yourself. You can't do that. You can't look at yourself. Because if you're in you, you can't look at you. And I'm not talking about you look at yourself in the mirror. Imagine you were the person in the mirror. And you're the one looking at that. That's what Hashem is. Hashem is both us and the observer of us, as well as the source of us. So Hashem is all three. That's what Hashem is. So the creator or the big thing that you're going to encounter after you die, it's none of that stuff. It's all of that, but it's none of that. Everything is Hashem. When we say everything is Hashem, we mean not just everything, not the universe, but even the source for the universe. So it's not just the universe, but it is also the knower, the observer of the universe. In order to observe the universe, where do you have to be? Outside of the universe. So when we talk about God in Judaism, we are talking about God, the observer of the universe, as well as the creator of the universe. So there is nothing that is absent from God. When we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, we're saying, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We're not saying, oh, we have one God, we're monotheistic. We're saying everything is God. Everything, the tea, the table, the people in this room, the air between them, the space, the granules of dust that make up the planet named 579VX, which is on the other side of the universe, it's all God. As a concept, as well as an existence, it's all God. It's a very, very important, not definition, because it's not a definition, but it's a very important approach. And when something has happened, it's important to recognize that now that it has happened, that is what the infinite consciousness, the one that wills existence, wanted to have happen. Regret is where we say, nah, shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't have happened. So it shouldn't have happened. As if we're the creator. We know all that is wise. We know all that is good. And therefore we decide it shouldn't have happened. It should have happened. That's a dangerous thing to say as well. It sounds insensitive. So what we use is the word acceptance. Now that it has happened, we accept that it has happened. Because if you say it should have happened, then that might give you an excuse to repeat it. So say you get someone commits a murder, commits some sort of crime, and you say, oh, it should have happened. God allowed it. No, because that's giving you an excuse. If you say, now that it has happened, we accept that it has happened, but now we have to respond to it. So regret is where we deny something that has happened has any purpose. So often, what's interesting about regret is usually it's very subjective. Very rarely do people objectively regret. You won't regret something that leads to your person. Generally, people were, I'm not talking about you. Generally, the people not in this room will not regret something which they benefit from. At least not in the immediate moments after. So let's say someone rips someone else off in business. They make $5 million. So I've got a friend who got ripped off, got scammed. I've got a friend who got scammed recently. Not in one of these Nigerian prints. It was an excellent scam. Excellent, if I may say so myself. Scammed a lot of money. A lot of money. Now, the person who scammed him is a criminal. Do you think that person has regret? No. What if this person was caught and then prosecuted? Do you think they'd have regret? Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how we start regretting things when we get hurt. So often regret pops up at a time that we feel hurt. And often we don't regret when we don't feel hurt, which means regret is very subjective. As opposed to objective regret is where I ripped someone off and then I go, oh, such remorse. How could I have done that? And the next moment I have to return the money. I can't live with myself. Now, sometimes people have experienced that, but professional scammers don't generally. They don't generally live like that. Then I go, oh, well, next time I'm not going to do that. Well, but for now I've got it. That was God's will. So regret is often just a symptom of pain, sadly enough. I know I've just been very negative, and I've just made that we're almost subjective hedonists, that we only regret when we've been hurt, but we don't regret when it doesn't hurt. But I just want to go with it because it stereotypes what I want to talk about. Of course, it's not the only moment. Of course, our consciousness kicks in, but I'll respond to that. Your conscience, not consciousness. Your conscience kicks in, so now you feel pain, so you regret it because you can't live with yourself. It's very hard to live with yourself when you despise yourself. But there's something interesting about doing things wrong. In the book of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe elaborates on this. It's a teaching from the Talmud, which is that tzaddikim, Balei Tshuva, people who have done something wrong, and then they correct, they right that wrong, and we'll talk about that in a sec. They right that wrong. Balei Tshuva stand on a higher spiritual level than tzaddikim. Tzaddik is a righteous person, someone who is perfect. The definition of a tzaddik is not a perfect person as in, they never do anything wrong. A tzaddik is a person that has no desire to do anything wrong. They haven't got a bad bone. You know when people say they haven't got a bad bone in their body? That's probably true, but they have bad thoughts. They may not have bad bones. That's a pretty good thing. A tzaddik doesn't have a bad thought. The thought of doing bad repulses them. So when someone says, and they're in the presence of a tzaddik and says, you should hear what happened today. And the tzaddik's like, I'm going to be sick. Please don't continue this. Or the person, a person in the presence of a tzaddik, does anything wrong, and the tzaddik feels like ill. So it's not just that they don't have a bad bone. They're completely repulsed by all things negative. That's a tzaddik. These are rare and few. The rest of us are somewhere between wicked people, as in people that do things wrong, or people that struggle with having thoughts of doing things wrong, which is the Beinoni. And that's an incredible place to be. Imagine you never did anything wrong. You just struggled with the thoughts of doing things wrong. So it's a bit like... Okay, so you all listen to me like I have all the knowledge, right? And we're going to talk about this during my surprise shortly. My sins I confess before you today. So every week I come, and there's no parking for this class. So some will say, Menachem, it's very good, you're popular. As Rochel says, Menachem, get in the car early and drive up 5 minutes earlier. But every week I find a parking spot. It's in the no parking spot across the road. Every week. What does the sign say? It's not a council issued sign. It's a privately issued sign. So I have sought legal guidance on it. But still, it's wrong because, someone has asked me really nicely, no parking anytime, 24-hour access. Somewhere there's a please. If you spell every letter backwards and replace it with the next letter in the alphabet, it actually says please. Don't park over here. So I park there every week. I'm going to have to stop now because now you're going to know. So every week that I stop parking there, I'm going to drive past it. And it says no parking anytime. And I'm going to be in front of it. And I'm going to be thinking, maybe I should. That's called thinking about doing something wrong. Now, imagine that was the worst crime I committed. Imagine that was the worst thing I committed. Imagine that was the worst thing you committed. Where you see the no U-turn sign outside Spirit Grove, and you think, it's 9:30 at night. But I'm going to go straight, and then I'll go around the block. So we've entertained the thought. Now, Melech Shalat HaLev says, you don't have to entertain that thought. Keep driving. Don't even think about it. Thinking is where you go, it'd be so good to do that U-turn. Thought is, do a U-turn. It's illegal. Okay, keep driving. That's thought. Thinking is, I'm just thinking about it right now. Like, it'd be so cool. I'd do a U-turn. It'd be easy. It'd be like this. I could park outside. I'm not going to. I'm just parking outside. So that's thinking about it. The Baal Tshuva is a person that vanquishes the action. They don't do the action. They might think about it, although the chances are that a Baal Tshuva, to be consistent with a Baal Tshuva. Baal Tshuva is someone who is not hot-headed, but motivated and driven. You know, when you're motivated and driven, you don't have distracting thoughts. You know what I'm talking about? When you're on a trip. When you're on a trip, you don't get distracted. It's not that you have to be told don't get distracted. You just don't get distracted. So generally, the Baal Tshuva, which is a permanent state, it's not a history. It's not, it's like gamblers or alcoholics. No one is a recovered alcoholic, according to the 12-step program, I believe, based on how I've seen it in play. No one is a recovered alcoholic. You're not a recovered gambler. You are a recovering gambler. It is something that you are struggling with for the rest of your life. The struggle's not very hard. It's still a struggle. And you don't put any obstacles in your path in that process. So Baal Tshuva is not, oh yes, once I did things wrong, but then I changed my ways. It's once I did things wrong, but now I consistently live a lifestyle which is one which I don't do anything wrong. I don't commit any crime. I try to be spiritually switched on, and I am successful in that I'm not switching off. That's what a Baal Tshuva is. A Baal Tshuva is a permanent state of consciousness. It's not, once I was 14 years old, but now I'm 30. It's now. Baal Tshuva is now. And that's why the Alter Rebbe elaborates on this and says that Baal Tshuva is a person that is living consistently and constantly in a state of where they've completely changed their past through their actions of now. Does it take away what they've done? No. Spiritually, does it do anything? Yes, it converts it into a positive. It's like coal. If coal sits in the earth for long enough, it turns to diamonds. Once it turns to a diamond, does it mean it wasn't ever coal? Of course it was once coal, but now it's a diamond. Doesn't matter what its past was. It's what the now is. So a Baal Tshuva is able to take coal and turn it into diamonds, whereas a tzaddik doesn't have coal, because tzaddikim don't engage in coal. And therefore, what does the tzaddik have? The tzaddik has gold, the tzaddik has silver, the tzaddik has precious crystals, but the tzaddik doesn't have coal. And because the tzaddik doesn't have coal, what will the tzaddik never have? Diamonds. But the Baal Tshuva was a person that had gold, but also had coal. Dabbled in the dark side of life. But now that they've gone through a process of change, they've been able to transform their past into an extreme positive, and therefore they stand on a high spiritual level than the tzaddik. What is the only way to correct your past? Or who is the only person that corrects their past? Someone that's done something wrong. If that person didn't do anything wrong, they wouldn't be better off. So it's not about regretting it. It's about acknowledging that something bad has happened in life. Something bad I did, something wrong, or I shouldn't have done that, or whatever it is. When you say I shouldn't have done that, don't say I shouldn't have done that. When you say I shouldn't have done that, say, what should I have done and what will I do next time? What's the lesson here? Because now that it has happened, I can't take it back. You can't take it back. One of the most incredible things about speech is that words are so cheap, and yet they're so powerful, and they're so flimsy, and yet so strong. They're so cheap, we use them up. We just use them up. You know that whole thing about you're given a certain number of words and then you die? It's not quite right, but it's not actually so wrong. You're not given a word count. You're given a soul that is responsible for speech. And a person who can't speak either doesn't have that soul, or for whatever reason hasn't been able to tap in and engage with that soul. The difference is there are people who never speak, and then there are people who can't speak and then they do. There's a difference there. It's a whole side thing. But one of the things about speech is once you say a word, you can't take the word back. Once you've said it, you can't take it back. We can't take back the past. But what we can do is we can change how we're going to respond in the future. And that's called transformative regret. Transformative regret is where you look back on a moment, and the regret is that was wrong. Not that I shouldn't have done it. Of course you shouldn't have done it. But that was wrong. So what am I going to do about it now? So it's a two-part process. What am I going to do about it now? It is a process of recognizing the wrong. So recognizing the wrong, And then it is acting on it next time you have an opportunity. So recognizing the wrong and then acting on it. Recognizing the wrong requires an objective state of being. And we go back to the first week of, was it the first week of Me'ach Shalat Halev? Yeah. We would go back to the first week of this series, Me'ach Shalat Halev, the mind over the emotion. Because in the emotion, we start justifying. Emotions are very handy if you ever want to justify something. If you ever want to justify something, just get yourself worked up. When you're worked up, then trust me, you'll be right. You will always be right when you're worked up. One of the things, so I work very closely with my father, and I don't recommend fathers and sons work together unless they follow my grandfather's rule. When Spirit Grow first started, my grandfather called me in. And my grandfather worked with my father for many, many years and worked with my uncle for many, many years. The family business was property development. It's not my family business, unfortunately, but the family business. My father didn't want to be involved in business, hence he travels and teaches and started Spirit Grow. But my grandfather said, give it 3 years. If after 3 years you're getting along, you'll be fine. If after 3 years it's not working, it's never going to get better. And so I say that because I have interesting moments with my father. They're called disagreement. Disagreement with my father can be anything from chuckling and laughing at each other all the way through to a full-blown demonstration of how strong one's vocal cords can be. How do we know that it's all good? Because we never really we've never left a disagreement upset, angry with each other. So it's usually only one way. If I have reached a certain crescendo in my songful spoken word, I will always ensure that I apologize at the end of the conversation. My father, being late 60s, almost 70, is much wiser than I and is also much more aware than I, and he doesn't seem to be able to reach those high notes like I do, like I can. So. So one of the things that often, when we have a very passionate discussion with each other, is when I'll say something and my father will say, I mean, people often say this, but when my father says it, it's a lot deeper because we work so closely together. He says, you're getting worked up. So normally when someone says, I'm getting worked up, what do you say? No, I'm not! Or something like that. You're getting worked up, but when he says it, it's a lot more than that. He's calling me into check. He's calling me into check in a way that he knows I will take it because we're so close and we work so closely together. It's something that's important to be brought up, otherwise the discussion can't continue. So he says, you're getting worked up. And at that moment, I have one of two choices, and I often go different ways. Sometimes I'll take a deep breath. It doesn't make me suddenly calm down, but it makes me catch myself, and hopefully there's a chance of toning it back down. And sometimes, and that's when the voice in my head says, "He's right. He's Tucker right. He's right. You're getting a bit worked up. What are you fighting over? What are you arguing over? Am I nitpicking? Because, sometimes you argue not the point. You argue like something minor just because you're in that mood. Is that what's going on? Or is there something that is deeply requires my passion and energy here? And it's possible it does require my passion and energy, but doesn't necessarily require vocal passion. There's other ways to express passion. So, and sometimes I opt to continue going. So that emotional build-up is like, no, I'm justified. No, I can't calm down. Ugh. You can calm down. You mean you don't want to calm down? Now, if my father said that to me, our relationship would be over. So he points it out. He doesn't then lecture me on it. That he saves for everyone else at Spirit Grow. But he points it out, and you have to be intelligent enough to catch yourself. But what am I saying? It requires Me'ach Shalat Halev. The emotions are worked up. And the emotions can even dictate to the mind, no, you're entitled to being upset right now. You're entitled to it. It is your divine right as a son to yell at your father when he is wrong. The emotions justify a thought process. And Meir Shaltal says, no. I know you're hot-headed right now. Think about it, though. Just think about it. Is this the appropriate response? Is this the appropriate tone? Is this how you talk to your father? Is he right? You know how many times my father's been right, but I've been louder? Do you know what that feels like, to realize in your moment of truth that you're actually wrong? It's very hard. It is very, very hard. And you have to, it's not about eating humble pie. You just got to shut up. Got nothing to argue here. This is Me'ech Shaltal Lev. We practice it all. I'm not proving anything to you, because I guarantee you everyone here can empathize with me both when I don't control myself, and everyone here can go, yeah, I also control myself. I also have moments that I just realize that something brings me to the attention that I'm maybe getting a bit carried away and I have to dial it down. We all do this. So when it comes to regret, we have to be objective and be able to say, what just happened? Or what happened then? What was the process? And what did I do? Or what did someone else do if you regret something for someone else? When someone around you has foot and mouth disease, that's where they put their foot in their mouth in a conversation. They say something that really is inappropriate. If you don't know, I can give you a few good examples. But where they said it and you regret it for them. There's something to learn there. But there's a lot more to learn when you regret something in what you've said or done. And regret cannot be, oh, I wish I didn't say that. Because if you're saying, oh, I wish I didn't say that, or I wish I didn't do that because it hurts, you don't regret it. You regret the pain. But if it's, I wish I didn't say that, or I wish I didn't do that, not because it hurts, but because that was wrong. If you can do that, then you're halfway through the Baal Tshuva. You're halfway through the process. If you can consciously regret, not that it took place, but that you did something wrong, and you can turn that into a new way of thinking or a new way of responding, which is code for a new way of feeling, a new way of responding, then the next time a situation that is similar to it pops up, you may be able to respond differently. And you will get another opportunity. The thing is, do you know how many people say, I love this, I love it, because I've started identifying in my own life, so I started laughing at it. People say, oh, if only I could have another chance. So we're always given other chances, not just one other chance. We are often given multiple chances to fix something that we've done wrong. The thing is, those chances may not look like the same thing, and they may not be with the same people. So really what we're saying when we say, oh, I wish I had another chance, is I wish I could go back in time and just relive that moment with that person, it would all be better. But it's not. Because the thing that happened to us, happened to us. It has nothing to do in this moment, subjectively, it has nothing to do with anyone else. When I have a moment of regret, it is not about the other person, it is about me. What is it that I learn? In what way am I going to change? Whatever has happened has happened. You can't clean up, you can't put the spilt milk back in the bottle. You can't put the cat back in the bag. You can't do any cliche. No cliches work. You can't do any of it. What you can do is learn from it. And when you're learning from it, it has nothing to do with the other person. It's not, they shouldn't have done that. It's what did I do and what could I be doing differently next time? And why is it that I feel bad? Not because it hurts me. What is it that hurts me? What value did I contravene? What law did I break? What thing was it that I did wrong that I say to myself, Menachem, that's not you? Like when I spoke about the Twerskis last week or the week before. This is behavior unbecoming of a Twersky. This is behavior unbecoming of a Menachem. In what way will I change? Then you're going to get another chance to relive the moment, because the moment isn't about the other person. So let's say I, God forbid, hit Michael. And then I go, oh my God, I hit Michael. And the reason why I'd realize that is because when Michael hits me back, it's going to come with 10 times the force that I hit him. So it hurts. I regret it. Now, the regret can't be because Michael hurt me, because that means I feel sorry for myself, not I regret. But if I realize, Menachem, you hit another living person, and I begin to regret my behavior and my actions, I may never be in the situation with Michael again, ever again. But Stephen, the person I've never met before, and I will meet him in 5 years, and he will press my buttons, and he will make me want to hit him. And I go, nah, I don't hit people. Now I'm a Baal Tshuva. Now I'm about Tshuva, because 5 or 10 years down the line, I was presented not with another opportunity with Michael. Because people often, when they look to create a tikkun, when they look to create a correction within themselves or within a lapse of time, they're looking to replay it. They're looking to replay it. You're never going to get that again. You might, but you probably won't. The tikkun's not going to look like the thing you did wrong. The tikkun is going to look similar. It will have the same skeletal makeup, but it won't be the same situation. And only if you've changed yourself within are you going to be able to have that tikkun. Are you going to be able to have that moment of correction? Are you going to be able to fix that moment of reliving an experience and responding differently? So regret is not about I regret what happened to you, or what I said to you, or anything like that. Regret is within, and what I will do about it and what I will change. And it requires the process of cheshbon and nefesh, which we did in our meditation last week, the replaying of a moment and reliving it and realizing what happened and knowing to look out for those things and be able to correct it. And knowing to where the weak spots are to work on them. And so when we talk about regret, don't ever stop regretting. Just stop regretting for the sake of removing pain. There's another thing about regret. That's all point A. Now point B. I've got 4 points. No, point B. Point B is obnoxious regret. Obnoxious regret. And this kind of goes against something I just said. But what I said before was for the sake of building up the point of recognizing a wrong as a form of regret and then correcting it within self and then having an opportunity later. Anything else I said is not what I meant. It was there for dramatic effect. So now, point B. And that is obnoxious regret. In the book of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe has this funny line. And he says, I wish, people get upset with themselves. I wish they were strugglers. I wish they were people battling with themselves. And people often interpret that as says, halavai beinani. I wish people were even a beinani. And people say, you see, even the Alter Rebbe says it's impossible to be a struggler. We're all bad people, so don't bother trying to fix yourself. And that's not really what the Alter Rebbe says. He's talking to a person. The Alter Rebbe is talking to a person who thinks so highly of themselves that they think they are tzaddikim. They think they are righteous, perfect people. And so when they do something wrong, they start beating themselves up. How could I have done that? And the Alter Rebbe is like, whoa, just settle down, Tiger. You're not a perfect person. Don't get upset that you did something wrong because it's beneath you. Get upset that you did something wrong because you did something wrong. Realize we do things wrong. So now, get off your high horse and own it. Don't get upset with, how could I? How could I have done that? I'm such a great person. I'm such a wonderful teacher. I'm such a good parent. Who am I to have done something wrong? That's obnoxious regret. Because there the pain is ego. It's a funny case of ego, of where I think so highly of myself that when I did something wrong, it wasn't that I did something wrong, it was that I did something wrong. And that is a form of regret, which is a very dangerous form of regret, but it's a very beautiful form of regret because it tells you something very important about yourself. Not only are you capable of doing things wrong, but actually, you also have a very inflated self-worth, which is not something that should be popped because that can hurt people. But it's something that needs to be worked on, and it needs a rechecking of who I am.